was 1929. I remember that day pretty well, 1929. Right then there was talking about a storm in our island. My God, what a beautiful morning that was talking about a storm in our island.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining me here on The Exchange. My guest this evening is retired Supreme Court Justice Jeanne Thompson. Ms. Thompson is the second daughter of the late Ellison Thompson and his wife, Sybil Thompson, nee Isaacs. She was born in New Providence, Bahamas, and spent her early years in Mayaguana and Acklins, where her father was a commissioner and teacher. She was educated at Government High School and at Wolmer's Girls' School in Kingston, Jamaica. Ms. Thompson was admitted to the degree of the Utter Bar by the Honorable Society of the Middle Temple in November of 1964 and was called to the Bahamas Bar in January of 1965. In fact, she was only the third woman to be called to the Bahamas Bar. She began her legal career in the chambers of Depuch and Turnquest and later joined her late uncle, Sir Kendall G.L. Isaacs. She later formed her own law firm in January of 1982, where she practiced until she became a Supreme Court Justice in January of 2002, retiring in March 2007. Jeanne Thompson began writing a column in the Nassau Guardian in 1970 called Satirically Speaking, and continued writing it until 1990. She's also a playwright who's written such works as Vicious Circle, Bread, Oil, and Standard, The Prodigal Brother, Columbus's Landing, and my favorite, Father's Day. She's also wrote a radio soap that some of you may have heard of, along with Sonia Mills for the Ministry of Tourism. It was called The Fergusons of Farm Road. And another soap opera called Sam Finley's Sand Castle. Ladies and gentlemen, my guest today is Jeanne Thompson, and I'm very happy to have you on as my very first guest. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
So let's just get right into it. I guess my first question would be, looking at what has been a stellar career, is who's been the most influential person in your life in terms of your personal sense of how you ought to live each day, in terms of your love of literature, and in terms of your career as a lawyer and jurist?
I would say two persons, and they would be my parents. Both of them were avid readers, and as a result, we were always with books, and they encouraged us to read quite a bit. And at one stage, my father was interested in being a lawyer, but in those days it was not possible for him to do so. He didn't have the resources or anything like that. But they were the two persons who showed me what was right and what was wrong and led me in the way that I have been trying to go.
So let me ask you this question. You've been a Supreme Court Justice, you've been a playwright, you wrote the first Bahamian soap opera, something that was really an institution in the Bahamas, the Fergusons of Farm Road. What has been the most difficult thing you've ever done?
The most difficult thing I've ever done was to go from a helpless hopelessness when I found out I had breast cancer to a positive activism in I am not going to let this beat me. And I think that was probably one of the most difficult things.
How long has it been now?
I had my surgery in '06.
You look fantastic.
Thank you.
Well done. Let's shift gears a little bit. What is the thing that you love most about Bahamian character and personality? I think in our society we always talk about what's wrong, but what do you love most about the Bahamian character?
I like the friendliness, the natural friendliness, and also the way that Bahamians can make fun of themselves and really have a good time laughing at, you know, as James Catlin's thing, laughing at myself. Yeah.
Do you think we still have that friendliness? I mean,
I
people
think
always
we do.
commented on it, but I wonder about that sometimes. You still think we still have it?
We still have it, I think so. Especially in the family islands.
Oh yeah, definitely, definitely. And so what is the thing that bothers you most about the Bahamian character and personality?
What bothers me most now is this sense of entitlement. You know, people feel that they deserve to get this job because I'm a Bahamian, whether they do the work or not. At least they have a job, and I'm entitled to this. You know, it starts, it seems, from the time that they're children.
Now, I'm going to hazard a guess that that wasn't the sentiment or the mentality when you were growing up.
No, it wasn't, not at all.
So what happened?
I don't know. I'm not a social scientist, and I haven't done any research. But I've just noticed it, particularly in the past several years. This, you know, this entitlement. I am entitled to this, and don't argue with me about it.
I wonder if it's not, if our governments haven't given us that expectation, because there was a time when we knew we had to do for ourselves, but now it seems government is kind of taking on that they will provide, you know, and they can't meet every need, but we seem to expect them to.
I think you hit it on the nail, really, because quite often you find, you know, they used to have an expression: you teach a man to fish, he feeds himself. Give him a fish, he'll have dinner for one night. And I think, I don't know if you've ever been where the social service people are getting money from social services. Well, I volunteer at the legal aid clinic, and there's a social service office downstairs, and they come there for every month. They used to sit on all the steps and everything. I have to really commend Melanie Griffin, because she's only been minister for a short time, and already she has a porta potty and a tent with chairs, so they don't have to sit on our steps anymore and block the way. But you know, they come and you can see they dress better than me. They drive better cars than me, and I say, well, you know, what is this all about? Yes.
Wow, I mean, I guess that's true in many societies, and people kind of work the system that way. Let's ask a slightly different question. Do you consider yourself a feminist?
I consider myself a humanist, not a feminist, because I feel, you know, I think for equality for everybody, not just for women. There are times when I would go on a limb and say, you know, we have to fight for certain things for women because they're not getting them. For instance, you know, that particular article in the Constitution does not, it excludes gender when you're talking about discrimination, which means that if a law is passed which discriminates against women, you cannot challenge it based on the Constitution.
How is that, let's ask the question this way, in terms of you, because you've raised a daughter, and you think about your own upbringing, did you find that, well, and you came up in the 60s, you became a lawyer shortly after women got the right to vote in this country, before we got into majority rule, so it was really a transformational period. But do you find that you're more conservative than you thought you would be in raising your own daughter, or do you find that you raised her the way you wished you had been raised by your parents, or you think that you had a lot of freedom that there wasn't anything your parents thought you shouldn't do or couldn't do?
Oh, there were many things my parents thought I shouldn't do and didn't allow me to do. I find that I was much more lenient with my daughter than they were with me. Yes. And as a result, she now thinks that me and her are on a level instead of I'm the mother and you're the child.
So you regret that?
Sometimes I do, but it does lead to some very interesting arguments and conversations. Mind you, towards the after I was called to the bar, me and my father did have arguments. You know, he did allow me to disagree with him. In fact, capital punishment was the thing that we disagreed most about.
Interesting. Well, ladies and gentlemen, my guest here today on The Exchange is retired Justice Jeanne Thompson, a fine writer and a great thinker. I'm very proud to have her as my first guest, and we'll be right back after these messages. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to The Exchange. We're here with retired Justice and a playwright, satirist, Jeanne Thompson. Before the break, Jeanne, we were talking about your role as mother and the difference between you raising your daughter and your parents with you. You were born in what year, if you don't mind me asking?
39.
39. My mother was born in 37. Do you think, you hear it all the time, do you think that the good old days were really better?
In some ways, they were much better. I think we were more cohesive as a society. We cared more for our neighbor. You know, we looked after our neighbors, and there was not so much crime. In a lot of ways, it's better now because of all the modern conveniences. You know, women don't have to spend a whole day cooking a meal. You know, there's so many helps with that, and also we're in the computer age, so you know, communication and everything like that is better, and we have access to the world so much easier.
You know, one of the things that's interesting, we look at poverty as a major factor in crime, and some people argue that, you know, one of the reasons for the spike in the murder rate and all sorts of violent crime and robbery is the recession. But a lot of Bahamians were pretty poor when you were growing up.
All of us were poor.
But we didn't seem to have the same level of violence and criminality. Why do you think? I wrestle with that issue. Why was that, you think?
Well, all of us were the same. I think and I always remembered when I went to Jamaica, I found a very, very solid class divide in there, which I didn't find here. You know, we all seemed to be of one level, except that we had that white-black thing,
right?
You know, which was, but you knew you couldn't get into the white area anyhow because of the color of your skin. But
so actually, you think that inequality
has helped. He has created this because I was always taught, live within your means. Don't worry about what the other man has. You know what you have, and you know what you can do with it. But in a lot of instances now, people say, well, look how they could be living in this big house, and I have to be living, you know, and then you look to how can I make money more easily, and that's how people got caught up in the drug trade and things like that. I know I'm putting it very simplistically, but that's how I feel.
Now, you're a playwright, an actor, as well as a director. What was your best, what is so far, because you're still in it, what was your best experience so far in theater?
I think my best experience was when we did Amen Corner in the old Dundas.
James Baldwin, eh?
James Baldwin's. Winston Saunders directed it, and it was a very powerful performance. And I mean, I've never seen the Dundas so packed. I'd never seen it so packed as then. And I was the rival person to Pandora Gibson, who was then the head of the church. And Winston decided I would make my last grand entrance through the back of the church, of the theater, and come in. Well, I was almost mobbed. Wow. I had trouble getting to the front of the stage.
People were really feeling it.
It was really, really a most fantastic theatrical experience.
Wow. Now, tell us a little bit about the Fergusons of Farm Road. I've been working with Gippy's Kingdom, which is a television soap. But I always tell people this has been done. We've done this, at least for radio. How did the Fergusons of Farm Road happen?
Well, what happened, this was the early 70s, and people were complaining that Bahamians were not being sufficiently polite to the tourists, and as a result, the tourists were complaining, and we were in danger of losing some of them. And the public relations firm for the Ministry of Tourism designed a program which included soap opera, which was written and taped in New York. And when it was called All About the Alburys, and you can imagine now, only American accents, and they sent it to Sir Clement Maynard, who was then minister, and he said, ain't no way this going on. And
to his credit.
Yeah, and he called me and asked me if I would do it. I said, but Sir Clement, I have never done anything like this. But at that time, Sonia Mills, who had been in Wilma's Girls' School with me in Jamaica, and who had been writing soap operas in Jamaica, and had also co-written a play with the late Trevor Rowan, she was here working in the Ministry of Tourism because her husband was, I think he was PS of the Ministry of Development. And she said, Jeannie, take it on, and we'll do it together.
And the rest is history.
And the rest is history.
But and it became more than just about being nice to the tourists, I would imagine.
It very much so, because it was only scheduled to run for 13 weeks. That was a 3-month period. But it became so popular, Sir Clement gave us leave to continue with it, and we explored many areas of Bahamian
And it was
life.
on for how many years?
It was on for 4 years.
This would air on radio around what time?
It
In the
was
morning?
right after the news, when that was optimum listening period, because everyone would listen to the news. So on, I think it was a Tuesday night, right after the news, you would have the
at
Fergusons
night?
at night.
Oh, okay.
And then they repeated it midday the next day.
Did you ever get any censorship? Did you ever have people saying, well, you shouldn't be discussing this, we shouldn't be exploring that? That wasn't a problem?
No, no, no.
And you had some famous Bahamian names in there. I know Cipriano McQueenie was in it, Eddie Minnis was an actor.
Yeah, he was the oldest son. Charles Bowleg was the
Charlie
father.
Bowleg, the late.
Yes.
Was Winston in it, Winston Saunders?
He was the narrator.
Ah,
And
well,
nobody
he had
had
that
a
wonderful
better voice.
I think the most famous character that people remember, and I was too young, but it was Miss Lai.
Miss Lai,
Who
yes.
played Miss Lai?
She was Miss Colley, Mrs. Colley.
Okay, all right, very good.
She had a fantastic laugh.
Oh,
Which
I won't
Eddie
ask you to imitate.
No, I can't.
So where are the tapes now?
Should be with ZNS.
All right, so we need to try and get that back on the air.
You think so?
You have the scripts, though, I understand, right?
I have some of them.
Some of them. Well, it's been a while.
Yeah, I think actually it probably should be redone, because it was the first time, and if you hear it now in today's
Might feel a little out
it
little
sounds
dated.
it isn't dated so much as it sounds very amateurish.
Oh, okay.
Which didn't matter to people in those days, because it was something they could identify with, and it was something new.
So tell us, you were the lawyer in a court case that inspired, if I remember correctly, 3 plays.
3 plays, yes.
2 by you and 1 by Winston Saunders, which people know You Can Lead a Horse to Water, but few might know that you also wrote plays about the same subject. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about that case.
Yes, this was a matricide. My son killed his mother, and as you can imagine,
It's pretty sensational.
yeah,
pretty-
people were very, very incensed about it. How could someone kill the mother? And Winston was then my law student, so he used to go to the prison with me, and he helped me prepare the case. So we were with that case together all the time. And what was interesting too was the woman who owned what is now Greycliff, the restaurant. She was very interested in that case because she was interested in capital punishment. Apparently her father had been a prisoner of war, something like that. And so she, myself, Winston, and Father Perner, we all tried to get him not have the death penalty.
So you were his lawyer. Did he confess to the crimes? Was there a trial? Was he convicted? Was he found guilty by a jury, or?
He was found guilty by a jury and eventually hanged. But the thing was that he did say he did it, but he did not mean to do it. And if you believe the way he said it happened, it would not have been murder. Although I think he didn't really tell us the whole story. In fact, there was the last time Winston and I went to the prison to see him, and we used to talk about all sorts of things. He was a very intelligent, incisive type person, and he said, we need to talk. And we said, and Winston was saying, Jeannie, we have this something we had to go to. And he got very irritated, and he said, okay, go on then. And he just left the room and went back to his cell. That was the last time we saw him. And so I think Winston and I agonized over this for a while, because we said he probably wanted to tell us
a bit more. Are you in support of the death penalty?
No, never have been.
Why not?
That's just saying that's why my father and I used to have that argument.
But people feel like this is, it's an eye for an eye, a life for a life, and this is the way to this is the message to send to these merciless people in our society by putting them to death.
You think they think about that? I mean, I think there was a hanging one day, and the next day there was a murder. In a lot of these particular murders happening now, if you look at them, they wouldn't be thinking, oh, if I do this, I'm going to hang. That's usually in premeditated murder. I can imagine some of these shootings are premeditated, but the last thing on their mind is that, you know, I could hang. Well, they can't hang now in this day.
No.
But I always felt that you know, it always worried me that you might hang the wrong person.
Well, we're gonna take a break and come right back. But before we do, I want to share the quote of the day. It comes from Jerome Fitzgerald, the Honorable Jerome Fitzgerald, who is the Member of Parliament for Marathon and the Minister of Education. And he was quoted on May 17th in the Tribune as saying, "We said that we are going to double our investment in education and training. We did not say we will necessarily double our budget." Certainly a quote to meditate on. We'll be right back here on The Exchange after these messages.
Was
It's
1929.
Exchange. I'm your host, Ian Strachan, here with retired Justice Jeanne Thompson. Jeannie, we were talking a bit about the theater, and I want to talk to you about the work of the playwright, the craft. I feel like a playwright must love the way people talk, must be really attentive to the way people speak and how they argue and their inflections and so on. What's special about the way Bahamians talk?
I don't know if it's anything special, but from the playwright's point of view, as you say, you have to listen. And what was interesting when I was writing the Fergusons, I wrote the thing in dialect, right? But a lot of times, some of the way I put it was not right to the person who was reading it. So together we learned how each other's worked, and that came out very well. And it was interesting too that I used to be so busy writing those episodes, and then I had the weekly column with the Guardian, so it became easier for me to write in dialect. So then I started writing satirically speaking in dialect, and it went over very well.
So there were no people saying, you know, wow, wouldn't this be easy if you just wrote this in English? Why are you, using the dialect? I can't understand this. Because sometimes my students say they can't understand the dialect when they
That's
read it.
very interesting, because a lot of the foreigners found it very interesting that I wrote in it, and they really enjoyed it. Mind you, I did have some people who were complaining about the Fergusons of Farm Road, now that you mention it, because they said, here I am trying to teach my child English, and you have this bad English on the radio.
I get that sometimes too as a writer. Well, how do you feel? What's your response to that? What's your response to that? That, we have trouble with the English language, and here you are celebrating or elevating this bad English, as they
But that's our culture. And if you kill your culture, you're killing a part of yourself. And I think that is really, really wrong. I used to just answer them and say, well, look, you need to just concentrate on your child's English. If she doesn't want it, you don't want her to listen to the Fergusons of Farm Road, that's fine. But to have an authentic piece, you have to write it the way that people speak it.
Tell me about Satirically Speaking. You did this column for 20 years.
As long as that?
1970 to 1990. Yes. Tell me a bit about it. What was your goal or your philosophy in it? Some people feel like the satirist is arrogant because you're standing above everybody else and looking at their flaws, poking fun at people. Does it come from a place of sympathy and love, or from this place of just, I am so fed up with this country and all of the ridiculous things, I'm going to poke fun at it?
No, it wasn't that at all. I just felt that we needed to be less serious about things that really affected us, and let us look at it in a lighter way and see ways that we could change. And I think that was what worked better with the dialect writing, I thought.
You had stock characters?
Yes, when I started writing it in dialect, I had Sophie Public, who represented the Bahamian population, and her sidekick, Zeke.
Zeke?
I was noticing that I had a Zeke in nearly every play I wrote.
That's right, there's a Zeke in Father's. What's with the name Zeke? You and the name Zeke.
That's what I was wondering.
It just represents this is the true. You ain't Bahamian if you ain't named Zeke. All right, so I love your play Father's Day, by the way. I've taught it in my college Bahamian literature courses a number of times. But it does kind of depict male-female Bahamian relations. There's humor, but boy, it doesn't paint a pretty picture. I think he wrote it in the 80s, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Around Father's Day.
No, I didn't write it around Father's Day.
But you...
Actually, what happened was that I had just become involved in the Adastra Gardens with Norman Solomon, and we were trying to do things more than just have the animals. And he had a shed there where people sat when they were waiting for the shows, and we decided to use it for a production, and Father's Day was the first production that we did there.
So, in your view...
and I wrote it for that.
You wrote it for that occasion?
Yeah.
Well, I'm happy that happened, because I love that play. But if you had to boil it down for those who haven't seen it, haven't ever heard of it, hadn't had the opportunity to see it staged, and I understand it might be staged again later this year, what's the kernel, what's the core, what are you trying to address there?
What I'm trying to show is that you know, I know when the last time it was performed, they said it was about sweethearting, but it really shows how men, relationship between men and women in our community, and I thought it brought out something that should see, you know, you really need to revisit this and try and treat each other a bit differently. And you know, they say, oh, that's Bahamian, you got his sweetheart, you know, it's almost...
But I look at it and I say to myself, all three women, there's the wife, there's the sweetheart, then there's the young sweetheart.
Yes.
And then there's Zeke, who has all three of these women. That all of these women were kind of oppressed in a way, but seem to be willingly so by our society in the way we do things in their relationship with men. Do you agree with that assessment? Is that,
yeah,
or is the young sweetheart actually a player in her own right and not oppressed at all?
She was a player, not oppressed at all. As are most of the young ones now. I mean, I don't know if you read the Grapevine and the Punch, but she appears in practically every one of those.
Wow. Are men and women equal in the Bahamas today?
No.
No?
No, they're not equal.
Why not? Why do you say that? I mean, you've risen. There were only three women lawyers in 1965 when you came to the bar. You've risen to be a Supreme Court justice. Every profession has women as representatives.
Well, in fact, if you look at it that way, you would say women are superior to men, because if you look at most of the ministries, the women are there. There now maybe more women lawyers than male lawyers. Certainly in this classroom, there are more women than men now. And as you say, more teachers. In my day, you had male teachers. Scarcely anybody has a male teacher in the Bahamas today. But the thing is, as I told you, really, you start with the Constitution. There's discrimination in the Constitution towards women. And if a man and a woman apply for the same job, I can tell you that the man will get it over the woman if they are of equal qualification. And
I think research would show, too, in terms of the earning power, even though women are more qualified than the men. Big controversy over the marital rape amendment to the Sexual Offences Act. Were you in support of such an amendment?
Of course I was. I have seen too many women who have been battered and beaten and raped by their husbands not to be in support of that. And what do you say to people who say this is an attack on the family? You're going to further destabilize this society that's already being hammered. It's a bunch of foolishness, because the thing is that when the children see the father mistreating the wife like that, you have them repeating the history. The women become they begin to say, this is how I'm supposed to be in a marriage. If a man hits me, I'm supposed to accept it. If he wants sex, I'm supposed to do it no matter if I'm half dead. What do you say to people who say, you know what, women are going to lie on men. Women are spiteful by nature, they're going to lie on men, and this is going to cause... But that happens in real rape. And, you know, I've heard people say you can't have marital rape because you can't prove it. It's difficult to prove. Well, rape itself is difficult to prove. So do we take it out of the penal code? I think there's such stupid arguments that are brought against it. But the main thing is that how it has affected, especially men, girls and boys growing up, when they see this type of behavior and they think it is what is supposed to be, and all the preaching in the world doesn't seem to change, won't change it, because actions speak louder than words.
It seems to me like the debate became like, look, women are taking over the society. The bedroom is, the last, I don't know, purview, bastion of male ascendance or authority. Don't take this away from us. That seemed to be some of what I was sensing in the public discourse about it.
Well, all this thing, I hear these arguments about when you're married, you become one, so you can't rape yourself. Now that's a stupid end of the stick. But let's look at it. A woman is separated. This is one good example. A woman is separated from her husband. She hasn't gone to court to get a separation or a divorce. She hasn't done anything like that. She just wants out of this relationship which has become brutal. Mm-hmm. And he just decides, well, you're still my wife, so he'll come in the middle of the night, knock down the door, and proceed to rape.
Mm-hmm. What's her recourse? Mm-hmm.
What is her?
And it's interesting. I mean, if the law recognizes me as battering you, as assaulting you, as killing you, then it should also recognize me raping you.
Exactly.
Even though we are one flesh, mm-hmm. One would think. I guess one of the things I want to also address is the matter of citizenship and how the law seems to discriminate against women in that respect in terms of their spouses. Mm-hmm. Maybe you want to explain that quickly to...
Well, what happens is that if a woman is married to a foreigner, the children born in the Bahamas become Bahamian citizens automatically. If she's married to a foreigner and the child is born outside the Bahamas, then that child has the right to apply for citizenship when she or he becomes
not automatic.
18. It's not automatic. Well, but it is for the men. Mind you, if it's a single woman, regardless of where the child is born, the child takes on the mother's citizenship.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'll take our final break and we'll be back here with Justice Jeanne Thompson. This is The Exchange.
Was 1929.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is The Exchange. I'm here with retired Justice Jeanne Thompson. I can't let you go without discussing a bit about the judiciary and the election which just passed. How do you feel about the last election, the way it was conducted? Do you think there are some ways you might be able to improve upon the way we choose who becomes the government? Do you think our electoral process could be reformed in some ways that would serve the public good?
I just think the persons who vie for political office have to change the way they do it. I don't like all this vilification and bringing down people in the campaign. The election process itself I have no difficulty with. I think it runs smoothly, but I just can't take. I didn't even listen to any of the so-called rallies because they just made me feel ill.
Would you prefer, do you think we need to have debates, national debates, at least the leaders? I
think it would be better because at least we'd know what these people, mind you, some of them are better talkers than others, so that someone who is really very nationalistic and really cares about the country may not come across as well as someone who's accustomed to talking like lawyers usually, more polished and can talk much better, and they may get a better end of the stick with that.
I mean, that's interesting because the political rally is a different kind of talking than you would expect in a debate.
But the rallies don't really they don't get into the meat of everything. I think I would like to see our politicians try to raise the level of thinking of the people rather than keeping at their emotions.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you a question. The former Prime Minister Hubert Ingraham, when asked about transparency in terms of campaign funding, you said you really can't legislate to make politicians honest. They just need to be honest. Either they're honest or they're not. How do you feel about the lack of openness in terms of who is financing political parties?
I think it's very important to know who is financing, because you know, someone may give you a very large donation. The next thing you know, this person is getting some big piece of land, maybe a whole island or something like that, or some other perk. You know, and I think we should know about it so we can say, I don't agree with this, because there may be some people with dubious characters who are giving, and you don't want those people to have a hold over your government.
If you had just two things that you would wish our political leaders had the courage to do, what would they be?
Political courage to do is the political courage to educate our people so that they can think better for themselves and decide that they want better politicians and better governance, and that is one of the things I would like to see. And another thing, I'd like to see one of them have the you know, the temerity to give us marital rape, and also to make certain changes in our Constitution.
Now, let's talk about the judiciary, because crime is a political issue, big political issue. But I wonder if the public really thinks about it in a complex enough way. A study done by Charles Wilhanna, looking at, I guess it was called a funnel of justice, looking at how many murders there had been versus how many cases had actually made it to court versus how many people had actually been, how many cases were completed, how many convictions there were. Between 2005 and 2009, 349 murders, only 18 ended in, at that stage had ended in a conviction. 10 murder charges, 8 for manslaughter. That's 18 out of 349 in a 5-year period. Do these figures trouble you? Or is this the best we can do?
You know, a lot of times, because the police are so pressed, the investigation falls down, and then the prosecution falls down, and then everybody blames the judges, you know. But the thing is, and also they are always rowing about people getting bail. But if you have someone who's awaiting trial, the person is awaiting trial, so the person is not a convict. The person is entitled to bail according to our Constitution and other legislation.
And I guess as long as you don't want him to get bail because it isn't your son, but if it was, you
would have another story. And another thing too, I feel that what is happening too is that I think lawyers are at fault. They're pulling, you know, drawing out cases. I don't know if it's because they want higher fees or whatnot, but I think it's doing a great injustice, and something should be done to be able to stop these lawyers from wasting the court's time in that way.
Judges can't do anything about that?
I would have thought they should be able to, but they seem reluctant to. I don't know why. But there's another problem too, and you have witnesses in cases who are told to come to court, and they sit around and they sit around. I know of one recently was sitting around for a week, and this person was unable to get any salary. There's some who were on commission, so they weren't able to make commissions. So by the time the case, they are called to give evidence, they become almost hostile witnesses.
The law protects people who are on jury duty, but doesn't protect witnesses in terms of salary and that sort of thing? Is that what you're saying?
Oh, yeah, the witness is not paid. So if a witness is summoned to court, if they don't come, they'll be in contempt of court, so could be sent to jail or, you know, and they're losing money, and they have people with families. So I don't know why there can't be a system whereby whoever is calling the witness can say, okay, I'll give you a call when we think we'll need you, instead of having the witnesses waiting around like that.
So where would you concentrate most of your attention in terms of trying to improve these kinds of results? Because I think 18 convictions out of 349 is pretty abysmal.
It is abysmal, and if you notice the papers, there's so many people who are being acquitted, because again I say a lot of it is the way the case is investigated and also the way the case is prosecuted. You cannot send a green lawyer into court to prosecute a case and expect to win it.
So to me, it feels like we need to get better talent
Yes.
in terms of prosecution.
And also,
And that means money. That
you
means
need-
we're not rewarding such people. The best lawyers,
Right,
it seems to me, are defending the accused,
Exactly.
as opposed to
to prosecute
bringing the
it.
state's case.
Yeah, yeah. And also, the police you need more police. You need better trained forensic policemen, and you need all of this to have a dent in it.
And
But you know, many times I think they know who've done these things, but for some reason, the persons aren't being arrested and prosecuted. You wonder if it isn't time to get some foreign police in here who don't know these people.
So the size of the society is militating against
Yeah,
the
I think
administration of
so.
justice
I
as
think
well.
so.
And possibly some corruption in there as
Yeah.
well. About the judiciary, and I know at one point you brought a suit against the government in relation to this, if I'm not mistaken, in terms of the payment of judges. But do you think that the process of judicial appointment itself we need to look at as a society, and perhaps
I think so.
it should
Yeah.
be more democratized?
Yeah, I would think so.
Because there are countries where you really do a little bit more. There's a little bit more
Searching,
legislators
yes.
involved in choosing.
Yes.
Here, it just seems kind of. To me, I don't understand how it happens.
I don't think anybody really. People
Understand.
apply and they're interviewed, and I think they must do some background check. I'm not sure.
So tell me, before we go, are you writing now? And what
When
are you
you say
working
I'm writing, I've finished a play now, and I got some news before I came here this afternoon that it may be a part of Shakespeare in Paradise in October.
That's
And
wonderful.
it's set in the Bahamas in the early 50s.
What's it called?
It's called Back of the Moon.
Back of the Moon, the Bahamas in the early 50s. Well, we certainly look forward to seeing that in this year's Shakespeare in Paradise. I want to thank you so much for joining me for my very first show of The Exchange. Ladies and gentlemen, before we go, I want to share some thoughts which we're going to call For the Record. And the first one is on neutrality. I want to say a word or two about neutrality. Before I do, I want to thank you all for tuning in to this evening's program, and thank the management of ZNS for reposing their confidence in me. Over the years, I've had the privilege of sitting in this studio as a guest of the accomplished journalist Jerome Sawyer and as a political commentator during our last two general elections. I never knew that this is where my life's road would lead. All my life I've wanted to be a writer, full stop. It so happens that I have occasionally written about politics and society, and that is in large part how I've wound up here. I am grateful to all those who have helped shape all that is good about me, and I am grateful to the professionals working behind the scenes here, making the exchange a reality. I am also, I believe, here because I've tried to be neutral in my analysis. Now, I don't consider myself a PLP, an F&M, and anything other than a citizen. And I want to be a good citizen, a responsible citizen, a public servant. Like thousands of you, I go to the polls and cast a vote. How I vote is a private matter. How I act and how I speak is not. My mission, my duty as an educator, as a writer, and as a journalist is to speak the truth and to always promote what I believe is the greatest good for the greatest number of people. Now, over the course of the weeks and months ahead, I will no doubt criticize the party in power. I hope I will have occasion to praise them as well. Similarly, I will hold every other political actor to account according to the wisdom and understanding I pray God will grant me. Now, I don't sit here pretending that neutrality means I don't have strong feelings about the issues. I do. I have my opinions about tourism, about immigration, about education, crime, justice, about democracy. My guests have opinions too. I don't pretend to have all the answers. I am open to the possibility, in fact, the reality, that my ideas are not necessarily the best ideas, and that there are better ways to move us forward than the ones I've considered. I hope to learn even as I hope to enlighten. Most of all, my goal is really, as far as possible, to rely on facts and what we can all agree is real in our world. Facts can be inconvenient at times, embarrassing, or fantastic, but facts are always, always neutral. For the record. Good night.
was 1929. I remember that day pretty well, 1929. Right then there was talking about a storm in an island. My God, what a beautiful morning there was talking about a storm in our island. Right then it was Treacy leaving out a harbor. With mothers and children on board was Treacy leaving out a harbor. Don't sail was the